Hello, I'm Kristen Opalinski, and I serve as the manager for ecumenical and interreligious relations for the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. I'd like to welcome you to today's conversation that forms part of our Bishops at the Border discussion at this year's National Workshop on Christian Unity. As we gather digitally this week, we'll review various ways our churches are responding to people in need in our own communities across the US and around the world. And so with that, I'd like to welcome Bishop Mark Seitz, Bishop of the Roman Catholic Diocese of El Paso. Bishop Seitz, it's wonderful to see you.
Thank you. So good to be with you.
Thank you so much for joining us today as we navigate some really big questions surrounding our call as Christians in responding with compassion and with love to all those in need. In particular today, I'd like to hear a little bit more from you about the ways in which your churches are responding to the situation at the border right now, the southern border of the US. Let's start by, when we talk about Christian hospitality, what does that look like to you?
Yeah, I think that's a very good way to phrase it because hospitality, I mean, it should be right there with faith, hope, and charity, right? You know, just fundamental virtue, part of the DNA of a Christian. And hospitality has always been a mark of us, you know, certainly as monastic life developed, those were the places that people knew they could go when they were away from home, when they were traveling, when they were on pilgrimage and so on. They knew that they would be well received in the monasteries. That was what they did. And it was actually within that monastic type of setting that what we refer to today as a hospital developed. You know, same root word, right? For hospitality, hospital. That's where it all began. And we as Christians should really be proud that that is part of our heritage that distinguished us from people, obviously good people, certainly in many ways, but the Christian vision has been so consistent and so strong through the centuries that this identifies us as, and you know, shows the way that the grace of God is at work within us, really, in the way that we receive those who are in need, those who are traveling. It's always been part of us.
Yes, I mean, I think the way you framed it, that it is truly part of our DNA as Christians, is something that we should continue to reflect upon, especially as situations like what is happening right now continue to challenge us as a society and also as people of faith. Tell me a little bit about the ways that your church is responding to the needs of refugee and migrant communities. Are there programs that you have in place from an advocacy standpoint and also supporting these communities?
Yes, to both of those questions. First of all, yes, our largest ministry in the diocese that is run at the diocesan level is what we call Diocesan Migration and Refugee Services. And I believe that they have something like 60 employees, which about reflects the entire number of other ministries in the Diocese of El Paso right now. You know, we don't have more than 60. In our marriage ministry, social justice, foundation, counseling, and so on. You know, I'd love all of those to be larger, but the great need here that we've identified is providing legal services, advice, assistance to people who are trying to regularize their situation. This goes all the way from unaccompanied children to adults, individuals, families, and so on. So that's been a regular part of our ministry. Then on the side of getting more into the hospitality for those who are crossing the border, call them immigrants. I prefer to call them refugees, because even though they might not fit some narrow definition that we often use, and which serves a purpose, to call them refugees also recognizes that people who are coming to us now are not coming simply because they're looking for a better job. They want to get a larger car, whatever. They're coming because they are fleeing. They're coming because they're trying to save the lives of their children. They're coming because they can no longer live in the conditions in which they're living where they are. This is a situation not of an option of migration, which is fine in itself, but it's forced migration in modern day style, right?
Right. This is such an important distinction to make, because I think, it gets lost sometimes. And people just just think, it's just people coming over the border, as you say, just for seeking a better life. And yes, and indeed, that is part of that drive, but it is so much more than that, especially in this moment.
Yeah, saying that they're seeking a better life presumes they have a life.
Right, right.
But the homicide rates in Central America countries right now are among the highest in the world. They mimic what we find in war-torn places, like Iraq and Afghanistan. The economic situation is a disaster right now after they had 2 Category 5 hurricanes roll through it. Like it wasn't bad enough.
Right.
Last summer, they had these 2 hurricanes. So many of the people who are coming to us now say, we lost our house, we lost our business, we lost our job. And with the corruption and the narco trafficking gangs and so on, the extortion they have to pay, it's just become unlivable in these places. So, what just blows my mind when we talk about these things and we hear them spoken of in our country today, there just is almost no awareness that these people are running for their lives. So as I said earlier, people who are not people of faith, they could still be amazingly good people, right? There are a lot of, in my opinion, anonymous Christians around the world, no question about it. But we who claim to be disciples of Jesus Christ, we have to, and we're all united in this, right? It doesn't matter what particular denomination we happen to be. We have doctrinal differences we still need to be working on, but fundamentally we know that if the Spirit of God is working in us, that we've got to love that person waylaid at the side of the road.
Right.
We can't walk by.
Right.
Jesus gave us this example, and he told us what you do to the least of these. He's told us that he will provide what our needs are. So for us to say, oh, I've just got to take care of myself, I've got to take care of my family. Well, of course you're going to take care of your family, but Jesus Christ, if he is in your life, you know that he's going to also take care of you when you take the risk, and it's always a risk, of helping someone else. So I kind of got away from your question, but
that's all right. I mean, just so much of I think you pointing out, there is great risk involved in radical love and being a force within your community in a way that often is countercultural. And this, our society has developed a very inward thinking, I think often inward thinking
That's right.
mentality. And
That's right.
so how do we as Christians push back against that and be countercultural? And I think you really spoke to that.
Right. I was speaking to someone about this the other day, and they were pointing out just how often it just seems like politicians are dividing up the political pie, and there's not a single issue that you can imagine. Something as simple as wearing a mask, for instance, becomes a political, you know, uh, uh, battle between us. My response to him was, in this issue, as well as so many others, we need to stop politicizing and start Christianizing. Stop looking at it through a political lens and start seeing it through the eyes of Jesus Christ. How dramatically we would change the way that we act if we could do that.
Well, I wanted to ask you a little bit about maybe some of the ways that churches are working ecumenically in your area. What kinds of relationships have been developed, and how are you responding together to this situation?
Okay, I can point out a couple of ways. Since the election time around then, there has developed in our area a group of organizations, and particularly churches, but also other NGOs, nonprofit groups concerned about this issue. And they've been meeting regularly, and they've been saying, how can we collaborate for this work? Back in 2019, when at one point we were receiving 1,000 up to 1,200 immigrants, refugees a day, we in this region rose up and we worked together to assure that not a single refugee was left on the street. I'm really proud of that. Our community has more financial stressors, economic stressors than most places. We certainly don't compare to other parts of the United States in terms of income and so on, but we were providing a place for them to stay, clothing, 3 meals a day, help in order to arrange for travel to wherever they had family in the United States, transportation to the airport and so on. It was incredible. It was beautiful. It was a multiplication of the loaves and fishes all over again, right? So that in that circumstance, though, we were responding to an immediate situation, this surge, and we didn't have much opportunity to prepare. This time we knew it would be much more complicated because of COVID, of course, and we wouldn't be able to house as many people in our facilities. We knew if we didn't work together, we were all going to, be in big trouble, right? So we had that incentive, and it was an ecumenical effort with different churches in our region. I'd like to mention another aspect where the ecumenical cooperation has shown itself. When the government basically closed down the border, it began with the institution of that program they called the Migrant Protection Protocol. It's one of those government acronyms that it, should be understood as meaning the exact opposite thing of what it says. Under MPP, we were basically saying, okay, you want to claim asylum in our country? Okay, go back to the other side and wait in one of the more dangerous areas in the country. You just wait there. We know you don't have anything, but that's okay. Wait. So when that happened, the flow across the border basically stopped, and almost overnight our shelters were empty. But what we knew was that okay, they're not coming here. They're arriving at the border and they're stuck. They have no place to go. They can't go home. They're fleeing their homes. They've sold everything. They've left everything. They're stuck here, and this is overwhelming the resources, the infrastructure, and so on. In our case, in Ciudad Juarez, the other side of the border. So we said, well, we have to do what we can to help them. Yeah, it's a different country, but guess what? They're still human beings, and their need, if anything, is greater now. So we established a fund. It's called the Border Refugee Assistance Fund. And we started getting the word out about that fund. And it was quite the wonderful response, actually. So since that time, we've been helping to support shelters on the other side of the border, provide for medical needs. We've worked with pregnant moms, providing their needs. We've helped with testing, COVID testing. Our most recent project, it's kind of an expensive one. We're going to provide chickenpox vaccines to children in families there, because they've had outbreaks, believe it or not, is chickenpox can really be a big problem in these shelters where people live so closely. So we're doing those kinds of things, and we're able to support. We're not just helping Catholics over there. You know, there's Anglican shelters. I believe there's a Lutheran church. There's Methodist church. You know, we're working with all of them wherever they're doing the work of the gospel. We're so happy that we've been able to support them. You know, and so in a small way, obviously, you know,
Sure.
we can't cover all their needs, but we're proud to be able to reach across the border, and to recognize, you know, I have that image of the parable that Jesus tells about the rich man and Lazarus. You know, the border is the wall of our house, right? And Lazarus is on the other side. And it seems that in our country that very often we kind of relive that parable, because if a person's on the other side of the fence, we just go, wash my hands, you know, they're not my problem anymore. And I just don't think that's what Jesus was trying to convey.
Right, right. And something that I hear you say is the need for flexibility and to change as the situation changes. I mean, you gave a perfect example of that. And I'm just thinking, as people are listening to this conversation and they're thinking, you know, how do I even possibly, you know, make an impact or have some sort of way of reaching out. You know, there needs to be not only mechanisms in place that our churches can help facilitate to build and to foster, but also a flexibility in approach. And so I'm just wondering, what could you say to the person who's sitting there listening to this conversation and thinking, how can I possibly pitch in, or what can I do with my congregation? You know, maybe that congregation's in Washington State or Nebraska, or, you know, somewhere that is not right on the southern border, and yet there are needs everywhere,
Right.
as well as the needs in your community. What would you say to them?
Well, first of all, I think you give me the opportunity to point out that the response to the needs here has been truly ecumenical and interfaith. You know, we've received volunteers from Washington State, from New England, from Minnesota, you know, all over the country. One of the groups that I contacted in looking for help when the last surge happened was a group of the retired Peace Corps volunteers,
Mm.
and they sent people, religious sisters from around the country have come in, and they've been a bulwark of our response. But right now in El Paso, we don't need volunteers, that many volunteers. We're receiving, between 1 and 200 a day, something like that. Nothing like what it was. And volunteering on the other side of the border is much more complicated. Certainly they need help, but if somebody's really ready to take on a challenge, that would be a beautiful way to respond. I want people to be aware that, as you pointed out, this situation is changing daily. Right now, the main thing holding people back is so-called Title 42. That's the CDC health restrictions that has given the green light for our border enforcement agencies just to turn back not only some, but pretty much everybody to the other side of the border, these young families and things. It's just, if you could see these people, some are being flown from Brownsville to here and then kicked across the border into Juarez. I was there when they came, and to see the despair, the tears, what do you do? You have nothing but the clothes on your back. But anyway, that's the way it is right now. We're hiding behind that health protocol, even though the people who are coming have a lower incidence of COVID than the people on our side of the border, right? But we're still going to be afraid of them. However, that's going to change. And the pent-up need on the other side, once we loosen up a little bit, is going to be tremendous. So be ready in your congregations. Please, if you hear the call, we need volunteers, be ready to help. In the meantime, I mentioned the Border Refugee Assistance Fund through the Diocese of El Paso. Everything you give goes directly to assisting people either on the other side of the border or this side of the border as needed. Right now, it's all going the other side. That the financial assistance can always help. We're hoping the government will be more willing to assist us than they have been in the past, but there are always going to be expenses that will not be reimbursed. And of course, anything we do across the border is very unlikely that the government will help us.
Well, Bishop, you've pointed to so many examples of the way in which the Holy Spirit is moving through these challenges and moving through us to respond to these needs. Where do you find hope in a daily sense? I mean, where are you going to find your hope in this such a challenging situation?
Part of what the passion and death of Jesus reminds me is that in those darkest moments that I need to look for hope, because that's when God will do his most wonderful work. That thought has sustained me through much of the pandemic and now with this circumstance. But besides that, my hope is always reinforced when I meet some of the people who are coming and see their tremendous goodness, their willingness to sacrifice for their children, to risk everything for them and for their good. My hope is reinforced when I meet our volunteers. I don't hold a candle to them. People who have set aside other aspects of their life, even those who are on our staffs, the different organizations, they're working long days, and they, just find somewhere to draw from where they can keep on giving. I still believe in the goodness of humanity, and the more that I witness to, the more I realize that we all need Jesus, right? You can't do this work, in my opinion, long term especially. You can't do it without that, being able to draw from that spiritual well, and to incorporate that vision. Being nice isn't going to get you through this. It has to be that deep, transformative grace that makes it possible for us to continue to love. And when you see that happening, you know that God is at work. And he certainly is in the midst of these challenges.
Well, thank you for sharing a little bit of that hope and those, inspiring connections, and also feeding us with that hope today in this conversation. We know the challenges are great, and everything is so fluid and ever changing. And thank you for sharing with us both the challenges, but also the amazing ways in which your members and many across the ecumenical landscape are working together to respond to these people's needs. And hopefully people have learned something from this conversation and will go out and activate within their own communities to respond. So thank you so much, Bishop Seitz, for joining us today.
Thank you, Kristen. It's a pleasure to be with you, and it's such an honor to work with our ecumenical community. I see God working in that too, right? God is showing us ways that we can come together across denominational lines, and so often we focus on the differences. Well, we have the same Lord in common, and that's what should give us hope on this front as well.
Amen. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And again, this is part of the National Workshop on Christian Unity, Bishops at the Border discussion. Thank you all who have joined us online for this conversation today.
God bless.